Guys, leaked footage out of Ukraine shows us just how hard the Ukrainian armed forces are using all the tools in their toolkit to protect their front lines. I'm going to break it down and show you guys just what it means to deter and defend from enemy attacks. Let's get into it. This comes to us from Reuters, as always, links in the description. Okay, so this is really interesting to me for a couple of reasons. First, let's talk about some big picture stuff real quick, and then we'll break down what we're looking at here. So when you have a front line, and we'll take a look at it on the map real quick, when you have this long line of contact that you're trying to defend, right, there's limited ways to solve the problem. And the problem you get that the Ukrainians have to do is that they have, of course, their forces, let's say, I mean, not evenly distributed, right, but spread across the entire line of contact. The problem is that like spreading peanut butter on bread, you're going to, if you want to cover the whole area, it's going to intrinsically get thinner. So then how do you prevent the enemy from grouping up and pushing hard into one specific area and slicing right through your thin trench line? The answer is that grouping up for an attack, preparing for an attack, it takes time, right? It doesn't happen instantaneously. And so if you can know before the attack actually happens, then you can, in the Ukrainians' case, oftentimes they seem to be using artillery and indirect fire to disperse those attackers, to prevent them from getting sufficient concentrations of men or equipment. The other option that's available is that if you know the attack is coming, or even if you miss it somehow and the attack happens, what you do is you have a reserve. And let's say, for example, that this is your line of contact, let's say right here, right? You would look at the places where the enemy is most likely to advance, and that's going to be along major roadways. And what you would do is find a location in the rear area where it's relatively safe, and you would have a reserve component. You would actually, in my case, probably have several. You'd probably have like a company, usually about 25% of your total manpower, sitting in the back on nothing but standby. And they would have the directions to all these, good maps, and they would have key defensive locations where they are most vulnerable. And then when one of these locations reports, hey, we are under heavy attack and it's so heavy, we think they're going to be able to punch through our lines, then all those defenders have to do is stall for time, because the QRF is going, or the reserve is going to mount up, drive to the location and reinforce that defensive position, right? Deterring the attack. You also, of course, have other things, right? Those people who are currently under attack, in addition to calling up the reserve, they will use other tools available like indirect fire, right? So they'll call for artillery missions directly on the enemy's location. That'll also help slow the attack and prevent a breakthrough. So this is, of course, the battle plan. But what does the actual execution look like? How do you actually detect these concentrations of forces? Well, we can see here's one example in which they look like they are using stable cameras, probably from elevated locations, observing the line of contact. Where this is also really common is actually on the US border, where obviously where there is a high volume of not necessarily combatants, but a high volume of illicit drug smuggling, illicit human trafficking. And so constant observation of that region is essential. And if you walk in, say, a border patrol station or a border patrol outpost, you will actually see a setup very similar to this. So you can see these guys are looking, and you can also see on the walls, they're kind of blurred out, probably for operational security reasons, but that there's maps. So there's maps that are probably going to denote where each camera is, so that if they observe something, they can quickly say, hey, camera 3, oh, that's in this sector. I'm going to call the unit in this sector and see if they can confirm what I'm looking at. You also, of course, have a board that I imagine this board probably tracks either equipment readiness status or personnel, for example, who's on shift on what days, because you have to be watching these cameras 24/7. And you could see this is a very simple, probably civilian type of feed. Look, it looks like they're literally on a Skype call with a camera, and that could be all it is. It could be literally like camera 3 is a webcam or a fancier camera mounted to a laptop that's then hardwired into regular Ethernet or like a LAN network. You can see, look at how tall this is, and this could also be drone footage being piped in. You know, we use all the tools. They are going to use all the tools available, including drones, including static cameras, including physical patrols. You can see here more drones, and it looks like, oh, this may actually be, they may actually be covering the windows. That's both to prevent observation and just to keep the light out of their eyes. It may also help. This may be like Kevlar and prevent, if there's a nearby artillery attack, it may prevent the glass from the window from shattering and hurting them. But this definitely looks like some sort of personnel tracking board. You can see there's names listed and some sort of, or a series of lists like a shift. You can see too, they have radios to contact all their positions. So you can see it looks like they're loading satellite photos and trying to compare what they're seeing to the satellites to really triangulate the position of what they're observing. Guys, if you want to know what like a military or paramilitary command post looks like, this is actually pretty close to it. You know, all of these sort of setups would be something we would naturally expect to see in, for example, a platoon or company forward operating base in Afghanistan. Totally normal. I would actually, at one point when I was tasked, my platoon was standing up what would become a large fob, but they were literally like, one platoon is going to secure this, and they gave we just drew a base defense plan on a whiteboard with the sectors of fire and the angles and everything. Yep, you can hear they're actually texting with the what I imagine are the positions. And actually, this is so extensive, this may actually represent, for example, it could be 5 or 6 separate fighting positions and the personnel at each one. And maybe contact info. You can see he's got a zip tie in his equipment that could be used. I mean, it may be used for detaining personnel, but more likely it's used to just quickly repair something that breaks. Okay, now let's look here. We got some real interesting stuff. He has a folding Krinkov style AK, this drone operator. You can see, I want you guys to notice how much cold weather gear they're already wearing. Notice you can see he has a polypropylene underlayer and an outer layer. This is standard camping stuff and is a testament to just how well equipped these troops are relative to their Russian counterparts. Okay, you notice this gentleman here, he looks like he is operating a drone and he's sitting literally right in front of a propane heater, which I think is hilarious. But look here, you can see they've got a battery charger that is run out here, charging these batteries. And it's probably going to just do like, this may be like the communications hub. You can see here, it looks like it's someone's garage that they've just sort of set up in. But this is exactly what forward operating headquarters or command posts are going to look like, forward CPs. You're going to have tough boxes. They're going to run wires. They're going to get things up and running. It's not going to look great, but it's all going to work, and it's going to be ready to work quickly. So I think he may actually be flying the drone directly overhead. That's why he's looking at the drone, not at the screen. So I think he's flying the drone directly overhead. It looks like his battle buddy here is watching on camera, maybe communicating up with another position. But again, this is how this will look. And as guys need new batteries for their drones or their radios, they'll come down and switch them out.
Русские там, да, сколько? 2 километра, 1,5.
No idea what he's saying, but this is an example of a mortar team in operation. You can see here, these guys are all geared up. He's even got his, what do they call it? The Vulcan, the custom Ukrainian made AK parts kit remix. It's a bullpup, but they're a mortar team, and well, let's just watch.
Да, может 1,5.
So what I suspect is there's this 5-person mortar team. You can see they're in a good defensive position. And let's say one of those drones has found an enemies that appear to be maybe concentrating or maybe conducting probing attacks, trying to find a location where they might be able to stage an attack. Well, they are going to call to this mortar team and say, hey, mortar team, you need to disperse these guys. They're starting to concentrate near this fighting position.
Что?
And now he's driving in what looks like not maybe an MRAP, but a much lighter weight MRAP, something like a JTV. But you can see here what I think is interesting is that in order to identify the unit and specific vehicle, they have it. This is unit 821. This is probably an identification of the exact unit that is using it. And this will allow them to, again, track and understand, okay, who is out, what vehicle is out, who's driving it. And more importantly, it'll allow them to track maintenance. They'll say, hey, 821, maybe they'll go park it and the driver will say, hey, I noticed 821, the heater's out and it's getting really cold. So we should have a mechanic take a look at it. Or, hey, 821 actually got damaged. And this sort of ability to know the status of your equipment is essential to understanding the capabilities of your unit more broadly. There's another one right in front of it. Looks like another light tactical vehicle. And you can see all these units moving back and forth. They could be natural forces just rotating through positions, but this would be an example of an excellent reserve, right? Because mounted troops, while they are sometimes more restricted in the terrain they can move through, these sort of armored personnel carriers are excellent QRF vehicles because they can move quickly to the front. They themselves offer the troops increased levels of protection. They can deploy troops out of them so that troops can enter fighting positions, but they themselves are a turret. They themselves are additional firepower. So those sort of things can be game changers, right? If you're in a defensive position, the enemy is pressing you, you cannot hold the position for much longer. Seeing an additional 6 to 8 riflemen and a huge armored behemoth that can put down, autocannon rounds is potentially a game changer in stopping and thwarting an attack. Yep, and those forces may not be going to reinforce a position that's in contact. It's also possible that they are just repositioning because you always have to understand. They go, hey, we've noticed there's a few more Russians doing recon in this spot. Let's put the QRF just a little closer to them. Oh, okay. Now we've noticed we don't actually think that's going to be an attack, or the mortar teams dispersed it. They're not concentrating there anymore. So go back to your original spot. And then they go, oh man, one of these units has said that there's been like 3 probing attacks. Maybe they're prepping for something. So let's move the QRF here. And it's always just a good idea to always be sort of repositioning in response to the most current situations on the ground. And sometimes it's just good to mix it up so that the Russians can't find exactly where you're operating. Anyway, guys, if you want even more combat footage, the viral videos that YouTube never will let me show you, those are all on the Patreon. Thanks so much to my Lieutenant tier patrons. The link to all of it is in the description. I'll see you all in the next one.